This is an open letter, not the kind with a salutation at the top and a signature at the bottom, the kind you find yourself reading and realize, somewhere in the middle, that it already knew. It's written to a specific man. You probably know if it's you. The older man who is alone right now, by divorce, by choice, by exhaustion, or by all of it arriving at once, who has been carrying something inside his own history that most people never saw and nobody adequately named. This letter is for him. You wake up on a Saturday and the apartment is quiet, not in a way that feels wrong, just in a way that used to feel wrong. At some point, without you noticing exactly when, the silence stopped being something you had to fill. You make coffee, you sit down, nobody asks you anything, nobody needs something from you right now. And for a moment, just a moment, you let yourself wonder if this is actually okay, or if you're just getting used to something you should be fighting. That thought, that specific doubt, that's where this letter lives. Because if you're an older single man, whether you got here through a divorce that took years to stop bleeding, or through a relationship that slowly became a job you didn't remember applying for, or through the accumulated weight of giving so much for so long that one day you just had nothing left to hand over, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You didn't end up alone because you failed at something. You ended up here after surviving something. There's a difference. And most of what gets said to men in your position skips right past that difference. The world has a very specific image of the older single man. He's either the cautionary tale, the guy who couldn't keep it together, who drove everyone away, who's now eating cereal alone at 60 and paying for it, or he's the fantasy, the silver fox who travels and dates freely and never looks back. Both images are lazy. Both of them miss the actual man. The one sitting somewhere right now, not particularly sad, but not particularly at ease either, wondering if what he's built inside his own life is enough, or if enough is just what people say when they've stopped wanting more. Here's what I actually know about men who arrive at this point in life. They spent years absorbing things that had no name. Not dramatic things, not the kind of thing you describe to a friend over drinks because it has a clean narrative arc. The slow kind. The kind where you look up one day and realize you've been managing someone else's emotional weather for so long that you forgot you were allowed to have your own. Where every disagreement somehow became your fault to resolve. Where being dependable was rewarded with more being depended on, until the version of you that existed before all of it became hard to locate. You didn't explode. You didn't walk out in anger. You held it, because that's what you were built to do, hold it. And for a long time, holding it felt like strength. It looked like strength from the outside. Maybe it even was. But there's a version of holding things together that isn't strength. It's just endurance, just absorbing the impact year after year and staying upright because the alternative was too complicated to think about. Think about the specific texture of that, the way you learned to read a room the moment you walked into your own house, the way certain conversations made your shoulders tighten before the first sentence was finished, the way you got good, very good, at knowing when to speak and when to let something pass. Because you'd done the math on what would happen if you didn't. You developed a whole internal system for managing what other people brought into your space, and that system worked. You kept the peace, you kept the structure, you kept going. What it took from you is something most men don't fully account for until much later, because the thing about absorbing impact for years is that it reshapes you without asking permission. You stop saying certain things because you learned they cost too much. You stop wanting certain things because wanting them led nowhere. You start building your life around a kind of managed diminishment. Less of this, less of that, fewer edges, fewer risks, until the shape of your daily existence is mostly about what you've agreed not to need anymore. And you do this quietly, incrementally, over such a long stretch of time, that at some point you look at the person you've become and you don't entirely recognize him. Think about what you stopped doing. Not the big things. Those are easy to name. The small ones. The Saturday afternoon activity you quietly let go of because it took up space that was needed elsewhere. The book genre you used to love that somehow became too selfish to spend time on. The way you used to be in a conversation when you weren't monitoring for tone, when your voice had a register it doesn't use much anymore. You didn't make a decision to set those things down. They just, gradually, over years, became things that belonged to someone who had time for them. Someone you used to be. That man, that careful, load-bearing, erosion-tested man, is who ends up single later in life. Not because he was broken, because he survived something that had real weight. And when it finally ends, whether you chose it or it chose you, there's a period that nobody prepares you for. A period that doesn't have a good name. It's not grief exactly, though it has grief in it. It's not freedom exactly, though it has that too. It's more like standing in a house after all the furniture has been moved out. Same walls, different echo. You learn things about yourself in that echo. Some of them are uncomfortable. You realize that some of what you called love was actually a deeply developed tolerance, that some of what you called commitment was closer to inertia dressed in noble clothing, that the version of yourself you presented for years, calm, reliable, unshakable, was real, but it was also armor. And armor that's been on long enough starts to feel like skin. Taking it off isn't relief, it's disorienting, because without it, you have to figure out who you actually are when nobody is watching, when nothing is being asked of you, when your day belongs entirely to you and you have to decide what to do with that. Most men in this position don't talk about how strange that is. How genuinely strange it is to have everything you thought you wanted, space, autonomy, no one tracking your schedule, and to sometimes stand in the middle of it and feel like you've forgotten how to want things for yourself. Like the wanting muscle has atrophied from years of wanting things on behalf of other people, or wanting things and being told those things were not the right things to want. Here's where it gets more layered. What you went through isn't just personal. It's not just your story. It's a generational story that most men your age lived some version of. The men who were raised to provide first and exist second, who were told that their value was structural, what they built, what they protected, what they made possible for others, who learned that expressing need was weakness, that asking for help was failure, that the correct posture was always forward-facing and load-bearing and available. These were not bad lessons in isolation. Some of them built extraordinary men, but they also produced a generation of men who reached a certain age and realized they had been so thoroughly trained to be useful to other people that they never got around to building a life that was useful to them. That's not a complaint. It's an observation, and it matters because it changes what being alone actually means for a man who came up that way. For him, solitude isn't the natural state. It's almost a foreign country. A place where the usual landmarks don't apply, where nobody needs him to hold anything together and he has to figure out what he's doing there if not that. So he fills it, or he tries to. Work, projects, staying busy enough that the quiet doesn't get loud, not because he's weak, because the quiet genuinely asks him something he hasn't answered yet. It asks him who he is when he's not being needed. It asks him what he wants when wanting something doesn't have to be weighed against what it will cost someone else. It asks him, gently, relentlessly, whether he knows how to be on his own side. Most men take years to answer that. Some never do. They find someone new as quickly as possible, not because they're ready, but because the question the solitude is asking is too uncomfortable to sit with. There's nothing wrong with them. The question is genuinely hard. It's one of the hardest things a person can face, the stripped-down version of themselves, without the role, without the context, without the ongoing proof that they matter. But the men who stay with it, who let the question ask itself without rushing to silence it. Those men arrive somewhere different, not overnight, not cleanly. Over months, sometimes years, they start to rebuild contact with the person who was there before all of it, the things he liked before they became inconvenient, the opinions he stopped voicing because voicing them created friction, the way he used to spend a Sunday afternoon when nobody was tracking how he spent it. Small things. They come back in small increments. A meal he makes because he wants to, not because it's someone's preference. A trip somewhere he'd talked himself out of for a decade. A conversation with himself, in his own head, that doesn't involve negotiating with someone else's expectations. And then, slowly, so slowly that he almost misses it, he starts to feel at home in his own company. Not because loneliness disappeared. Loneliness still comes. It comes on holidays. It comes when something good happens, and the first instinct is to tell someone who isn't there anymore. It comes on ordinary Tuesday evenings when the apartment is quiet, and he's not sure whether to call that good or just neutral. Loneliness comes, but it stops being a verdict. It stops being proof that something is wrong. It becomes just a feeling, one of many, that moves through and doesn't require an emergency response. That shift is not a small thing. It looks small from the outside, but it isn't. It is, in fact, one of the most demanding things a man can do, to stop treating his own solitude as a problem to be solved and start treating it as a space to be inhabited. Because inhabiting it means facing it. Means sitting with the fact that no one is coming to make it better, means choosing, actively and repeatedly, to build something inside your own life worth living in, not for anyone else, not to prove anything, not as a recovery project, but because this is the life you actually have, and it deserves that from you. The man who gets there carries himself differently. You can see it when you're paying attention. He's not performing anything. He's not working to convince you he's fine. He orders what he wants at a restaurant without asking anyone's opinion. He keeps plans he made for himself. He says no to things without a 3-paragraph apology. He's not cold. He can be warm, genuinely warm. But the warmth comes from a place that isn't desperate for a response. He gives it because he has it, not because he needs something back. And there is something else about that man, something quieter. He has learned to receive good things without immediately converting them into obligations. A good meal doesn't make him think about who he should be sharing it with. A weekend that goes exactly as he planned doesn't end with the low-grade guilt of having used the time for himself. He has rebuilt, piece by piece, the simple ability to let something good just be good, without justification, without the second thought that undoes it. That sounds small. It isn't. It is, in fact, what most people spend their whole lives trying and failing to do, to be present inside a moment without needing that moment to be anything other than what it is. That version of a man is not who gets left behind. That is not the consolation prize version of an older single life. That is a man who did something most people never attempt, who went all the way down to the foundation of himself after everything had been stripped away and rebuilt from there without lying about what he found. Stop for a second and take that in, because the story you've been told, the one that says a man your age alone is somehow a failure, somehow proof that something went wrong. That story requires you to look at everything from the outside in, status, optics, what it looks like to someone who doesn't know what it took. But when you look from the inside out, when you look at what you actually absorbed, what you actually survived, what you actually put down, and what you actually picked back up, the story is different. The story is about a man who kept showing up when it was brutal, and then, when it was finally over, had the courage to stay with himself long enough to find out who that actually was. Not everyone makes it there. Some men spend their last decades looking backward, at what should have been, at who wronged them, at the years that got spent on things that didn't hold. They're not bad men. They're just men who never got the chance, or never took it, to sit with the question the solitude asks. And watching them, You understand why. The question is hard. The quiet is hard. The slow work of locating yourself after years of being located primarily in relation to other people. That's genuinely hard. But you've already done hard things, harder than this. You have a very specific kind of evidence of that, not abstract, not theoretical. You lived through the version of things that breaks people, and you came out the other side still functional, still curious, still capable of a good evening and a decent meal and a conversation that matters. That's not nothing. That is actually a great deal. So when the Saturday morning comes and the apartment is quiet and you're sitting there with your coffee wondering if this is okay, the answer is yes. Not because everything is perfect. Not because the loneliness never shows up. Not because you wouldn't choose some things differently if you could, but because a man who has earned his own company and who knows what it costs to get there is not living a smaller life. He is living a life that is entirely his. And that, after everything, is exactly enough.